Have you ever been so excited about doing something for God that you forgot to ask how He wanted it done? What if a day filled with music, dancing, and celebration suddenly turned into a moment of shock and fear? What if the very symbol of God's presence brought both judgment and extraordinary blessings? And what can we learn about worship, obedience, and God's holiness from one of the most dramatic events in Israel's history? Join us as we journey back to ancient Israel, where a king after God's own heart sought to bring God's presence back to the center of his nation. What followed was a story of joy, tragedy, reverence, and triumph. This is the story of David and the Ark of the Covenant. After becoming king over all Israel, David had one great desire. He wanted the people to seek God once again. For many years, during the reign of Saul, the Ark of the Covenant had been neglected. David knew that God's presence should be at the heart of the nation. So he gathered Israel's leaders and spoke to them. "If it seems good to you, and if it is the will of the Lord our God, let us bring back the Ark of our God, for we did not seek it during the days of Saul." The leaders agreed immediately. A great journey was about to begin. People came from every corner of Israel. Together they traveled to Baalah, also called Kiriath Jearim, where the Ark had remained for many years. The sacred Ark was brought out and placed upon a new cart. Uzzah and Ahio, sons of Abinadab, guided the cart. The celebration began. Music filled the air. Voices lifted in praise. The people sang with all their strength, and David worshipped before the Lord with great joy. Everything seemed perfect. But suddenly, disaster struck. As they approached the threshing floor of Chidon, the oxen stumbled. The cart shook violently. The ark appeared to tip. Without thinking, Uzzah reached out his hand to steady it. The ark was holy. God had commanded that it be handled only according to his instructions. The moment Uzzah touched it, God's judgment fell. Uzzah collapsed beside the ark. The celebration stopped instantly. The music ended. Silence filled the crowd. David was deeply troubled. He did not understand why this had happened. Fear filled his heart. How can I bring the Ark of God to me? Unable to continue, David changed his plans. Instead of taking the Ark to Jerusalem, he placed it in the home of Obed-Edom. For 3 months, the Ark remained in the house of Obed-Edom, and something remarkable happened. God blessed Obed-Edom and his entire household. His family prospered, his possessions increased. Everything he owned flourished under God's favor. Soon, news of these blessings spread throughout Israel, and eventually the news reached King David. David realized that the problem had never been God's presence. The problem was that the ark had not been handled according to God's command. This time, David carefully followed God's instructions. The Levites were chosen to carry the ark on their shoulders using sacred poles. Everything would be done God's way. Once again, the journey began. This time, God blessed the procession. The Levites carried the ark carefully. The people rejoiced. Sacrifices were offered to the Lord. Trumpets sounded. Musicians played. David could not contain his joy. With all his heart, he worshipped before the Lord. The king was not concerned about appearances. He was focused on honoring God. Thousands joined him in celebration. The entire nation rejoiced together. At last, the Ark of God arrived in Jerusalem. The city erupted with joy. Trumpets sounded. Voices shouted praises. The sacred Ark was placed inside the tent David had prepared. Burnt offerings and fellowship offerings were presented before the Lord. David blessed the people in the name of the Lord. Every man and woman received bread, meat, and cakes of raisins. It was a day of thanksgiving and celebration. David also appointed Levites to minister continually before the ark. Day and night, worship would rise before God. The sounds of harps, lyres, cymbals, and trumpets would fill Jerusalem. God's presence was once again at the center of Israel. The story of David and the Ark of the Covenant teaches us an important lesson. God desires our worship, but He also desires our obedience. Good intentions alone are not enough. We must honor God according to His word. When David learned to follow God's instructions, blessing followed. And just as God's presence transformed Israel, His presence can transform our lives today. When we seek Him, obey Him, and worship Him with sincere hearts, we discover the same truth David learned long ago. There is no greater blessing than living in the presence of God,